Hello and welcome to the second video in my Keeping Chickens series. This series is aimed at people who are new to chicken keeping or are thinking about getting chickens in the near future. It covers off a lot of the basics you need to know before getting your chickens, or if you've already got them and you just really want to know what you need to be doing with them. Chickens are a great addition to gardens, particularly if you're looking to become a little bit self-sufficient from your own back garden. If you haven't already, I'll put a card up at the moment so you can nip over to the last video, which covers off some of the things that you probably need to know before you go about getting some chickens. But today, what I'll be doing is taking you through the equipment that you need to give some basic care to your chickens once you get them. So these are our chickens. They are a cross between a Rhode Island Red and a West Sussex. Absolutely lovely, great layers, and so unbelievably friendly. They just follow me around all day. We got our first flock of chickens back in 2000, and that's when we experienced the majority of the setup costs. Those costs can appear to be a little bit expensive, but once you start to think about that cost over time, it starts to really make a lot of sense. Our start-off costs were around about £200, but there are some things that I wish we hadn't bought earlier on because we've had to replace it, increasing the overall setup costs for our chickens. One of the things you will need to get when you are starting off is a coop, and you can see the coop I have is the one behind here, which is a self-made coop, so you can make them yourselves out of recycled material. This one was made out of fences. When we first started out, I did buy a coop and run from Amazon, and I must admit I think that was a bit of a mistake. The coop was far too small for the flock we had. We originally had 8 bantams, and they very rapidly outgrew that coop and run. There are several things you need to think about when you're looking at coops for your chickens. First off, you need to think about predator proofing. Unfortunately, we experienced 2 attacks from foxes where they managed to break into this coop, so I've now completely covered it in wire to stop that from happening. Chickens also like to perch when they sleep, so in this I've set up a couple of perches in there so they can all get on there and get themselves off the ground and make them feel a lot safer. Another key feature of a coop is the nesting boxes. Nesting boxes is where the chickens will go to lay their eggs. One of the interesting things I found when I got my chickens is that no matter how many nesting boxes I had, they would all fight over the one nesting box. And that's because chickens lay one egg at a time, and what they like to do is to pool their eggs together, and only one of them would sit on it. The final point I want to make about the coop is the way chickens get in and out. They need a door because they need to be protected from predators, but there are different types of doors that you can get. The first door we had on the very first coop that we purchased off Amazon was a manual door. So we had to open that in the morning, had to close it in the evening, and whilst it was lovely to see my chickens first thing, in winter it got very boring very quickly. So we wanted to move on to an automatic door once we moved up to the bigger homemade coop. Now I made a mistake on that first door. That was one that relied on a light sensor, and the problem I had with that sensor was that it was far too sensitive, so it was closing well before the chickens were ready to go to bed. We've now upgraded to a more expensive door which goes on a timer, so it's a lot more reliable. But I have to say, every night we still come out and check to make sure that door has closed, because we've lost 2 flocks to foxes so far, and we know there is a lot of foxes living nearby. One expense we hadn't planned for when we got our first flock of chickens was a run like this that's fully enclosed with chicken wire. The main reason we purchased this was because we had to comply with the bird flu laws that came in that winter after we got our first flock. The rules here in the UK means that we have to keep our chickens separate from wild birds when there is a control zone in place, and you have to keep them netted and also have a covered area for their food and water. Because of that rule, we decided to purchase this run. And I have to say, it's actually been pretty good. This is now into its 2nd year and it's still going pretty strong. The only thing I will say is to keep an eye on the tie wraps used to fix the chicken wire. Unfortunately, they do go brittle and they do snap. If you are thinking about using this style of run for your chickens, you need to remember that there is a gap at the bottom, and so it's not fully predator proof, and you may need to dig more wire mesh into the ground to protect them. Once you have a coop and a run, you're going to need a few more extra pieces for your chickens. First off, you're going to need a way of watering them. Now there's many ways that you can set up a watering system, but I've gone fairly simple. I started off with the watering systems that you can buy, which are just made out of plastic, and you just need to manually top them up. There's a little reservoir in them and it just allows them to drink from it. Now I did find that after a while, because you're just moving it around a lot, it did start to leak. So I have upgraded to a galvanized waterer, and I'm really pleased I did that. It is a little bit more expensive, but it isn't rusting, it isn't leaking, and it's doing the job really well. You'll also need a feeder for your chickens. And again, there's different ways that you can set up your feeders, and there's plenty of YouTube videos showing you really good setups using drain pipes and other materials to create your own feeder. But again, I went for the relatively simple option. When I first started, I used a plastic feeder and that was perfectly fine. And I actually still use those for the amendments that I give to my chickens over the course of the year. But like the water, I have upgraded to a galvanized metal feeder. And that's because it's bigger, it's stronger. It has a cover that covers over the feed, so it keeps it nice and dry. And it, again, is just far more robust. So it's a really good purchase, but it is a little bit more expensive. So a plastic feeder isn't a problem at all. They're the things that you really need to have when you start off your flock. But as you go, it's worth really thinking about trying to improve the quality of life of your chickens. The first thing I'll suggest is a place for them to perch when they're out in their run, and some other things for them to play with and walk around, just to give them a little bit of interest in their run. Your chickens will absolutely love to go out in your garden, but be aware that they will destroy things and they will cause damage. So if you're keeping them in the run most of the time, make sure you give them some things to do to keep them interested. The final tip I'll give you before finishing this video is about managing smell. As much as I love chickens, they do smell and they are dirty. I wasn't sure when I first started looking after chickens how best to manage that smell and that problem. But since then, I've learned that actually wood chip is a really good way of managing it. So every year we refill the chicken run with wood chip, and doing that once a year has really kept the smell down. Even when we had something like 14 chickens in there, it wasn't particularly bad. I'll add this to the chicken keeping playlist. So that's 2 videos down, and I've got some more coming over the next months. If you've liked this, please like and subscribe. That really helps this channel out, and I'll see you next time.